Yamanaka successfully made his 12th defense of his WBC Bantamweight Championship with a 7th round knockout over Carlson. Really fun fight. Shinsuke Yamanaka once again showed why he is basically the best bantamweight in the world, pretty much bar none. He's one of these fighters, one of the few fighters in the division where he truly reigns supreme over that division in a major way. Early on here against Carlson, he started off pretty well. I mean, he's not necessarily known for being a fast starter or a slow starter necessarily. Usually starts off in a pretty good rhythm, well warmed up fighter. You know, of course, a southpaw. He was already throwing a lot of jabs and left crosses at Carlson from the very jump. Carlson was looking to make it a bit of a rough fight, go into the body a little bit. But Yamanaka's overall superior technical sharpness and hand speed would wind up pretty much telling the tale of the fight. He won the first 2 rounds fairly handily. The third round I thought was a little bit closer. I actually think one of the judges might have given Carlson the third round because I noticed they were doing WBC open scoring for this fight, and one of the judges had it 3-1 for Yamanaka after 4 rounds, whereas the other two had it a complete shutout for Yamanaka, because the third round to me was a bit of a swing round. Carlson did land a couple of really good shots, a couple of good right hands that seemed to momentarily shake up Yamanaka. But Yamanaka was also landing plenty of his own heavy shots as well throughout that round. So, that was definitely a swing round. Could have gone really to either fighter. I actually edged it to Yamanaka. In the fourth round, it was a little bit more of the same. Carlson managed to land a couple of heavy shots toward the end of the round, but overall it was really still a bit more of a dominant round for Yamanaka overall. In the fifth round is where the knockdown started. Yamanaka managed to first land a beautiful left cross, right hook combo to drop Carlson the first time, and then in the follow-up flurry managed to drop Carlson a second time. Well, it wasn't really a whole lot of clean punches that landed in the midst of that second knockdown. It was really just kind of an accumulation of blows. But even after that, though, Carlson was still fighting back very, very hard, and he did actually manage to land a very hard, it wasn't even necessarily a left jab. It was almost like Carlson was squared up and almost like in a southpaw stance when he threw that left hand. So it's like he got a little bit more torque and overall force on it, and it landed like a bit more like a power shot as opposed to a straight up jab, and that seemed to really shake up Yamanaka for about the last 25 seconds of the fifth round. That being said, though, it wasn't enough to win him the round. Obviously, he had taken 2 knockdowns before then, and he had gotten badly shaken up himself throughout most of the round. It just so happened that he managed to land a nice hard shot towards the end of it. Sixth round was a bit more of the same. Yamanaka just landing excellent shots, especially a lot of good left hands to the body. There was a couple left hands to the body in particular that really seemed to make Carlson's entire posture change. Like he started really bending over, just like almost trying to relieve the tension from getting hit right in the solar plexus with that beautiful left cross that Yamanaka managed to crack him with. And Yamanaka actually managed to drop him once again in the 6th round. Like I said, just the technical skills, the sharpness, the hand speed, everything just put together very, very nicely. Yamanaka is definitely one of the more complete fighters in the sport. And then finally in the 7th round, Yamanaka once again managed to drop Carlson twice in the round. First knockdown was pretty early on, I'd say about 15 or 20 seconds in, somewhere around there. Managed to drop him, and then that was pretty much all she wrote. Carlson was very badly hurt. Yamanaka went in for the finish, dropped him once again, and after that second knockdown, the referee Ian John Lewis managed to wave it off. Speaking of Ian John Lewis, I was actually kind of surprised that he actually got another fight as a referee so quickly after the big controversy over his scoring for the Ray Vargas versus Gavin McDonald fight this past weekend, where Vargas, of course, managed to become the WBC Super Bantamweight Champion. Wasn't able to do a vid on that. I was bit under the weather over the weekend, so I wasn't quite feeling up to it, but feeling a little bit better right now, so that's why I'm trying to pump some of these vids out, definitely do some of these reviews, and Yamanaka definitely did a solid job. As I mentioned before, he's definitely the premier bantamweight champion, the premier bantamweight fighter of the present time, and it's really tough to exactly call who he should be fighting next, because by and large he's going to be pretty much favored over anybody and everybody that he fights. Interestingly enough, the guy that was his #1 contender Soryan Sarungvasai, who is actually the former WBO Bantamweight champion, recently tested positive for some banned substances. I'm not sure exactly what the substance was off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up, but I don't have the article in front of me right now. But it looks like he's going to be out of the running. But the number 2 ranked fighter for the WBC is actually Luis Neri, who was basically like my prospect of the year this past year for 2016. Really, really good fighter, very hard puncher, and somebody that actually I think might wind up potentially being the toughest challenge possible for Shinsuke Yamanaka at the moment. A tough, rugged, hungry young lion within a very aggressive style, heavy hands, and like a very, very fast-paced, fast starting style. A guy that's pretty much on top of you from the opening bell, and he's looking to just land bone-crushing shots. He's looking to really take it to you and knock you out, like really just put a mean beat down on you. But I mean, otherwise, of course, the other champions of the division wouldn't be bad to see him fighting any of those guys as well. You've got Zanat Zakiyanov, who recently dethroned Rashid Warren for the WBA Bantamweight Championship. You also have Jamie McDonald, who's still the WBA, I think it's the regular or the interim championship. Of course, they did order a rematch between him and Loborio Solis. Hopefully that comes off, and if it doesn't, if McDonald winds up moving up to 122, as was potentially rumored that he might do, hopefully Solis can get a shot at Rashid Warren, which would leave Yamanaka to potentially fight maybe either the IBF champion Lee Haskins or the WBO champion Malak Tapales. Or, interestingly enough, with Tapales, there's going to be a very good fight coming up between Zolani Tete, the former the former IBF super flyweight champion, and Arthur Villanueva, who is a former IBF title challenger for that super flyweight belt as well. They were originally supposed to fight at super flyweight about a year and a half, 2 years ago, but wound up not coming off. Tete wasn't able to make weight anymore. He moved up, and then Villanueva wound up taking a close, I think it was a technical decision loss to McJoe Arroyo for that belt. But so that'll be a really interesting fight between those two pretty solid boxer punchers, and the winner versus Tapales is definitely a great fight. And then should the winner potentially go after Yamanaka after that, be excellent to see. Omar Narvaez, interestingly enough, is actually going to be returning fairly soon on a PBC card. I'm trying to remember exactly which card it was. I can't remember quite off the top of my dome, but he'll be back in action fairly soon. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to continue. Maybe making one final run at the top level, potentially. Him versus Yamanaka, I think, would be really interesting. Especially, it might put it a little bit into perspective where Yamanaka compares to not necessarily some of his bantamweight peers, but some of his peers maybe at super flyweight, who may eventually move up to bantamweight at some point in the future. You got Nagi Inoue there, you got Carlos Cuadras there, Kali Yafai. Yafai is definitely a pretty big super flyweight. This guy that's campaigned as high as super bantamweight or even featherweight in the past, albeit I think that was really more, just because it was comfort making the weight, and he was still a novice pro at the time when he was making those weights, as opposed to really being optimal as a super flyweight or potentially as a bantamweight in the near future. Aside from Luis Neri though, it's really just tough to imagine most of the top bantamweights really giving Yamanaka like an even fight, a 50-50 type fight. I also wouldn't mind seeing him fight Juan Carlos Payano. Of course, Payano ran Anselmo Moreno really close and managed to get a technical decision over him. And Moreno gave Yamanaka probably his 2 toughest fights, along with Loborio Solis. Had a draw in the first fight, and in the second fight, managed to drop Yamanaka on his way to wind up getting stopped by Yamanaka eventually, after just one of the fights of the year of 2016. Just a fantastic knockdown, drag-out brawl between those two, and a very technical brawl at that. But overall, Yamanaka is definitely the top fighter. But yeah, it would aside of Luis Neri, and should he potentially get past the young upstart challenger, potentially seeing him in the future against somebody like a Naoya Inoue if he eventually moves up to bantamweight, which is definitely conceivable considering how young he is. He's I think about 23 now. So, he's barely really getting into his man strength. So, it's very likely that we could potentially see him at bantamweight at some point in the future. Definitely the same for Khalid Yafai. as well as some of the other guys at super flyweight, maybe even Carlos Cuadras. Should he manage to eventually get revenge on Roman Gonzalez, I could definitely see him moving up to bantamweights for further glory and further big money. Gonzalez is a Tekken fighter. Yamanaka is a Tekken fighter. If he was to pull off, the revenge victory over Gonzalez at some point in the near future, I could definitely see that being a real boon to his career, boon to him both money-wise as well as just critically wise, critical acclaim-wise. Cuadras to me is pretty much showed that he was definitely a top fighter, just overall, period point blank in that first bout with Gonzalez, and it looks like the two of them may clash again, considering the fact that they're going to be a part of the Golovkin versus Danny Jacobs card, with Carlos Cuadras fighting the only man to take Naoya Inoue 12 rounds, David Carmona, and Roman Gonzalez, of course, fighting the former WBC champion Sisakitsa Rungvisai, in which should be a really interesting fight that'll really test Gonzalez's overall technical skill, ability, and defensive prowess as well. That's pretty much that. As I said before, Yamanaka, he's a real tough out. There's really only a couple of guys here and there between 115 and 122 I could really see giving Yamanaka just an excellent fight. Should some of those guys happen to move up to 118, or should Yamanaka happen to move up to 122 at some point in the near future? Otherwise, I think Yamanaka is going to continue to show and prove, and show himself to be one of the most probably dominant champions of the era, really. 12 successful title defenses, and all of them in a fairly dominant fashion, other than the draw against Anselmo Moreno. Just excellent fighter, brilliant technical skills, good footwork, good hand speed, good combination ability, varies up his combinations as well. Good jab, good hooks, good crosses. Just an all-around excellent fighter. Probably one of the better technical fighters in the sport, plying his trade currently. So that's pretty much all I got to say with regards to Shinsuke Yamanaka over Carlos Carlson. Props to Yamanaka for the victory. Carlson definitely put up an excellent fight, and I believe this was the first fight that he had ever fought that was scheduled for the 12-round distance as well. So he definitely showed some grit and determination in there, in spite of taking a bit of a shellacking overall. But Yamanaka did a solid job, and there's really not much shame in losing to really one of the better bantamweights and one of the better lower weight fighters of this era, in a most definite fashion. So that's all I got to say for Yamanaka versus Carlson, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.